I've always been someone who preferred the stillness of the night. There's a certain peace in the world when it's asleep, a silence that feels heavy and protective. That's why I took the job as a night security guard at the Henderson Plaza, a 20-story glass and steel monolith in the heart of the business district. During the day, it's a beehive of frantic energy. At night, it's a graveyard of empty cubicles and humming servers. My station was the main lobby desk, a vast marble-topped island equipped with a bank of monitors and an internal phone system. My job was simple: watch the screens, do 2 rounds per shift, and ensure the building stayed locked. It was easy money for a college student who needed time to study. Or so I thought. The incident happened on a Tuesday around 2:14 a.m. I remember the time exactly because I had just looked at the digital clock to see how much longer I had until my coffee break. The lobby was silent, save for the low, rhythmic hum of the HVAC system. Then, the phone rang. It wasn't an outside line, it was an internal call. On the small LCD screen of the desk phone, the caller ID flashed Room 1402. I frowned. The 14th floor belonged to a high-end architectural firm. They were strictly 9 to 5. I hadn't seen anyone badge in for that floor all evening. I picked up the receiver, assuming someone had simply forgotten to log out and was working late. "Hello, security, this is Elias. Can I help you?" I asked, my voice echoing slightly in the empty lobby. There was no answer, only static. But as I pressed the phone closer to my ear, I realized it wasn't just static. It was the sound of heavy, wet breathing, and behind that, a faint, rapid clicking, like someone typing on a mechanical keyboard at a frantic speed. "Hello? Is someone there?" I asked, my tone hardening. The typing stopped instantly. The breathing hitched, then went silent. After a few seconds of agonizing stillness, the line went dead. I immediately turned my attention to the monitors. I pulled up the camera feed for the 14th floor. The hallway was pitch black, lit only by the green exit signs. I switched to the interior camera for room 1402. The office was wide and open, filled with drafting tables and computer monitors. All of them were dark. Nothing moved. No one was there. I shook it off, chalking it up to a technical glitch or a short circuit in the old phone lines. But 10 minutes later, it rang again. Room 1402. This time, I didn't say anything. I just picked up and listened. The heavy breathing was back, more ragged now, as if the person on the other end had been running. Then, a whisper. It was so low I almost missed it, a rasping, sandpaper voice that sent a jolt of ice down my spine. "It's not in the closet." The line clicked shut. My heart was hammering against my ribs. My logical mind tried to find an explanation, maybe a prankster, but the building was secure. I had checked every door myself. I decided I couldn't just sit there. I had to go up. I grabbed my heavy maglite and stepped into the elevator. The ascent felt unnervingly slow. The floor indicator lights ticked upward. 10, 11, 12, 13... Ding! The doors slid open to the 14th floor. The air here felt different, colder, thinner. The smell of stale coffee and ozone lingered in the air. I clicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting a violent path through the darkness. I made my way toward room 1402. Every creak of the building sounded like a footstep. Every shadow cast by my light looked like a crouching figure. I reached the glass door of the architectural firm and swiped my master key. The lock turned with a loud metallic clack that seemed to echo for miles. "Security? Is anyone here?" I shouted. Silence. I walked toward the desk where the phone was located. It sat on a pristine white surface, surrounded by blueprints. I reached out and touched the seat of the office chair. My blood turned to lead. The fabric was warm, deeply warm, as if someone had been sitting in it only seconds before. I scanned the room wildly with my flashlight. "I know you're in here, show yourself." I checked under the desks, behind the large format printers, and inside the break room. Nothing. Then I remembered the whisper. "It's not in the closet." Against my better judgment, I walked toward the supply closet at the back of the office. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle. I flung it open, expecting a masked intruder or a disgruntled employee. It was empty, just stacks of paper and extra toner cartridges. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Get a grip, Elias," I muttered to myself. I turned to leave, feeling foolish for letting a phone call get to me. That was when the phone on the desk, the one right in front of me, began to ring. I froze. I stared at the phone. My flashlight beam danced shakily over the buttons. I looked at the caller ID. It wasn't an internal extension this time. The screen read, "Main lobby desk." My stomach did a slow, nauseating flip. No one was downstairs. I was the only guard on duty. The building was empty. I slowly reached out and picked up the receiver. I didn't speak. I couldn't. From the phone, I heard the sound of the lobby. I heard the distant hum of the HVAC system I had been listening to all night. And then I heard a voice. It wasn't the raspy whisper from before. This voice was clear, mocking, and it sounded exactly like the lobby's acoustics. "I see you on the monitor, Elias. Why aren't you looking behind you?" I didn't turn around. I couldn't move. My eyes were fixed on the glass partition of the office. In the reflection of the glass, illuminated by the pale moonlight filtering through the skyscraper windows, I saw it. The closet door I had just closed was slowly creaking open again. But it wasn't coming from inside the closet. A hand, pale, with fingers that were far too long and tipped with jagged yellowed nails, was reaching around the outside edge of the closet door frame, gripping the wood. Then a face began to peek out. It had no hair, no ears, and its skin was stretched so tight over its skull that it looked like wet parchment. It had no eyes, only deep hollow sockets filled with shifting shadows, and it was smiling, a wide, toothless grin that stretched from ear to ear. I didn't scream. My throat had closed up. I dropped the flashlight and ran. I didn't wait for the elevator. I hit the stairs, my boots thundering against the concrete as I spiraled down 14 flights. I didn't stop until I burst into the lobby. I scrambled behind my desk, gasping for air, and immediately looked at the monitors for the 14th floor. The office was empty. The closet door was shut. I sat there, trembling, waiting for the sun to rise. I didn't call the police. Who would believe me? I just waited. When the morning shift guard arrived at 7 a.m., I handed him my badge and told him I was quitting. He asked me why I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I didn't answer. As I walked out of the glass doors of the Henderson Plaza and into the cold morning air, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text message from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a photo. It was a picture of me taken from behind, sitting at the lobby desk. The timestamp on the photo was 2:14 a.m., and in the darkness of the lobby behind my chair, 2 faint hollow sockets reflecting the light of the computer monitors. I never went back to that part of the city again. Sometimes when my phone rings at night from a number I don't recognize, I don't answer. I just let it ring, wondering if on the other end, something is waiting for me to say hello. There is a specific kind of loneliness that only exists in a warehouse at night. It's not the peaceful solitude of a forest or the quiet of a library. It's an industrial silence, a heavy, suffocating stillness filled with the smell of cardboard, stale diesel, and cold concrete. I worked as a night shift inventory auditor for a major e-commerce giant. The facility was located on the outskirts of a dying industrial town, surrounded by miles of gray fields and rusted chain-link fences. It was a dark warehouse, meaning that to save on electricity, the motion sensor lights only flickered on in the specific aisles where someone was working. The rest of the building stayed plunged in an oppressive, ink-black gloom. My job was simple but tedious. Walk through the C sector, the furthest, oldest part of the warehouse, and use a handheld scanner to verify the barcodes on high-value pallets. I usually wore noise-canceling headphones to drown out the unsettling groans of the building's metal shell, but that night, the battery had died. It was roughly 3:30 a.m. when I reached the back of Sector C. This area was filled with oversized items, furniture, gym equipment, and large wooden crates that looked like coffins stacked 30 feet high. The silence was absolute. Every step I took on the polished concrete echoed like a gunshot, vibrating up through the soles of my boots. I was scanning a row of heavy shelving when I heard it. Giggle. It was faint, high-pitched, and unmistakably human. A child's laugh. I froze, the red laser of my scanner painting a steady dot on a cardboard box. My first thought wasn't fear, but confusion. This was a high-security facility. There were no children for miles, and the night shift was strictly adults. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded thin and fragile in the vast space. "You're not supposed to be in here." The laugh came again, further away this time, echoing from the labyrinth of pallets at the very back wall. "Hee hee." "Look, if this is a prank, it's not funny," I said, my heart beginning to thud against my ribs. "I'm calling security." I pulled out my radio, but as I keyed the mic, all that came out was a wall of white noise, a harsh, distorted static that sounded like 1,000 voices whispering at once. I clicked it off, the sudden silence feeling even louder than the noise. Then came the shh. It wasn't a gentle sound to quiet a baby. It was a long, sharp hiss that seemed to vibrate from the floorboards beneath me. Shh. I began to walk toward the sound, driven by a mix of duty and a desperate need to prove I wasn't losing my mind. I navigated through a narrow corridor created by 2 rows of towering crates. The motion sensors above me groaned as the dim orange lights flickered to life, one by one, trailing my movement like a spotlight. As I reached the final row, I saw them. Small, dusty footprints on the concrete floor. They looked like they had been made by bare feet, but the toes were slightly too long, the arches too high. They emerged from behind a stack of tires and led directly into a 4-inch gap between 2 massive shipping containers. I knelt down, my flashlight trembling in my hand. "Hey kid, come on out, it's dangerous here." I angled the light into the narrow gap. The beam traveled about 10 feet back into the darkness between the steel walls. At first, I saw nothing but dust motes dancing in the light. Then, my beam hit something pale. It wasn't a child. Huddled at the very back of the gap was a figure. It was small,
roughly the size of a 10-year-old boy, but its skin was the color of a mushroom, a sickly, translucent gray. It was naked, its spine protruding in sharp, bony ridges. It was crouched in a way that no human skeleton should allow, its knees tucked behind its ears. As the light hit its face, it slowly turned its head. It had no hair, no nose, and no eyelids. Its eyes were two massive, milky white orbs that reflected my flashlight like a cat's. But the worst part was the mouth. It was stretched into a permanent ear-to-ear grin, filled with rows of needle-thin, translucent teeth. The child didn't move. It just stared. Then its jaw unhinged further, and it let out that same high-pitched, mocking giggle. I didn't think. I scrambled backward, tripping over my own feet, and bolted toward the main exit. My flashlight beam swung wildly, illuminating the towering shelves that now felt like the ribs of some giant beast. As I ran, I realized the motion sensors weren't just reacting to me. Behind me, the lights were flickering on in a rapid, rhythmic sequence. Click, click, click. Something was moving behind me, and it was moving much faster than I was. I looked up at the ceiling, and my heart nearly stopped.
The thing wasn't on the floor. It was skittering across the top of the industrial shelving, 30 feet above the ground. It moved with the fluid, jarring grace of a centipede, its elongated limbs gripping the metal beams as it leaped from one shelf to the next. It was flanking me, cutting off my path to the main bay doors. I dove into a side maintenance tunnel, a narrow passage lined with humming electrical panels. I slammed the heavy steel door shut and threw the bolt. I stood there in the dark, gasping for air, the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears. For a moment, I thought I was safe. Then, I heard a soft thud on the other side of the door, followed by a scratching sound, not at the bottom of the door, but at the very top. I looked up. There was a small ventilation grate near the ceiling of the tunnel. It was barely 6 inches wide. I watched, paralyzed, as a long gray finger poked through the mesh, then another. The metal grate began to groan and bend as if it were made of paper. A pale, milky eye pressed itself against the opening. I didn't stay to see it come through. I ran deeper into the tunnel, eventually finding a fire exit that led out to the parking lot. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I drove out of that lot so fast I nearly took the security gate with me. The next morning, I refused to go back. I told my supervisor I had a family emergency and quit via email. 2 days later, a friend of mine who still works there sent me a screenshot of a security still. It was from the camera in Sector C, time-stamped 3:42 a.m., exactly 4 minutes after I had escaped. The image was grainy, but you could clearly see me sprinting toward the maintenance tunnel. And there, directly above me, clinging to the underside of a ceiling girder like an overgrown insect, was the gray figure. It was looking directly into the camera lens, its hand raised in a small, mocking wave. But the detail that haunts me the most? In the photo, the thing was holding something in its other hand. It was my handheld scanner. The device was found the next day at the very bottom of that 4-inch gap between the shipping containers. When they checked the logs, they found that the child had been busy. It had scanned over 200 items in the minutes after I left. Every single item it scanned was the same. High quality, child-sized wooden coffins.
There is a stretch of Highway 97 that locals call the Dead Zone. It's a 40-mile ribbon of cracked asphalt flanked by ancient, suffocating pine forests. There is no cell service, no streetlights, and for a long time only one place to stop, a rusted, flickering gas station called Miller's Outpost. I worked the graveyard shift there for 6 months. My office was a cramped glass booth reinforced with plexiglass, surrounded by stale snacks and overpriced motor oil. At night, the world felt like it ended at the edge of the gas pumps. Beyond the reach of our buzzing fluorescent lights was nothing but a wall of black trees and the relentless sound of the Pacific Northwest rain. It was 3:15 a.m. on a Thursday, the dead hour. The rain was coming down in sheets, drumming a hypnotic, deafening rhythm on the corrugated metal roof. I was leaning against the counter, nursing a lukewarm coffee, when I saw headlights. A boxy, charcoal gray sedan from the late 90s drifted out of the darkness. It didn't pull up to the pumps. Instead, it parked at the very edge of the lot, half hidden by the tree line. The engine cut out, but the driver didn't get out. He just sat there. I watched him through the rain-streaked window for 5 minutes. My internal alarm started humming. Out here, you don't park in the shadows unless you're trying to hide. Finally, the door creaked open. A man stepped out. He was tall, unusually tall, wearing a yellow fisherman's slicker that looked far too large for his frame. The hood was pulled low, casting his entire face into shadow. He didn't walk, he trudged, his boots heavy and wet on the pavement. The bell above the door chimed, a cheerful sound that felt horribly out of place. He didn't look at me. He didn't head for the restrooms or the coolers. He walked straight to the back wall, where we kept a large laminated map of the county. He stood there, perfectly still, the water dripping from his yellow coat on the linoleum floor with a steady tap, tap, tap. "Can I help you find something, sir?" I asked. My voice sounded unnervingly loud in the small shop. The man didn't turn. He raised a hand. The skin was pale and puckered like it had been submerged in water for days. He pointed a long, trembling finger at a spot on the map. It was exactly where we were standing. 10 years. His voice was a wet, gurgling rasp, like someone trying to speak with a throat full of pebbles. 10 years since the water took the road. I'm sorry?" I replied, gripping the edge of the counter. "The road is fine, sir. Just a bit of rain."
He slowly turned his head toward me. Under the deep hood, I couldn't see eyes. I only saw a pale, bloated chin and a mouth that seemed to hang open, as if the jaw muscles had rotted away. He took a step toward the counter, and a foul, brackish smell hit me, the scent of stagnant pond water and decaying vegetation. "It's coming back," he whispered. "The tide doesn't forget." He turned abruptly and walked out into the rain. I watched him get back into the gray sedan. He didn't start the engine. He just sat there, the car's silhouette blending into the dark forest. A wave of pure, instinctual dread washed over me. I reached over and flipped the heavy deadbolt on the front door, something I wasn't technically supposed to do until my shift ended. I felt safer behind the glass, but only barely. I walked back to the counter to call the owner on the landline, but as I reached for the phone, I stopped. On the glass of the display case, right where the man would have been standing if he had come to the counter, was a patch of fog from someone's breath. But the man had never come to the counter. He had stayed by the map, 10 feet away. My heart skipped a beat. I looked closer at the fog on the glass. As the condensation began to clear, I realized there were marks in it. Someone had traced a message in the steam with a finger. The writing was on my side of the glass. It read, "Don't look behind you." My breath hitched. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Instead, I looked at the reflection in the dark window across the room. The man in the yellow slicker wasn't in his car anymore. He was standing right outside my booth, his face pressed flat against the exterior glass. But there was someone else.
In the reflection, I saw the door to the staff-only storage room behind me, a door I knew I had locked, slowly swinging open, and a hand, identical to the man's, was reaching out from the darkness of the closet, reaching for my shoulder. I didn't scream. I lunged for the front door, fumbling with the deadbolt I had just locked. I burst out into the freezing rain and ran toward the road, not even stopping for my car. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. I was picked up 2 miles down the road by a long-haul trucker who said I looked like I'd just crawled out of a grave. The police went to Miller's outpost an hour later. They found the station empty. The front door was wide open, and the engine of my car was still running in the lot. But they found something else. The staff-only storage room was flooded, not with rainwater, but with thick, salty seawater and clumps of rotting seaweed, despite the ocean being 50 miles away.
On the floor of the booth, right where I had been standing, was a single yellow fisherman's hood. Inside it was a scrap of a newspaper from 10 years ago, an obituary for a man who had vanished when his gray sedan hydroplaned off Highway 97 and sank into the black depths of a nearby lake. The man was never found, but the map on the wall was different when the police found it. A new hole had been poked through the laminate, right over the location of the gas station. And next to it, written in wet black silt, were 3 words: "Almost home now."